neurosurgeon.
Da-da-da-da-da. Bottom of the hour, it's the Ray Gibson Show until it's not going to be anymore. Guam Regional Medical City and the Point have a thing called Your Healthcare Partner. We get to do this about once a month, and this month it is Brain Injury Awareness Month. We've spent a little bit of time talking about some crazy stuff, like my buddy Kano, who had an issue that the only one guy on Guam was able to do the surgery for, and I'm talking to him here on the program. Also talked about lobotomies because it's interesting to me, this kind of old way of trying to figure out, this is, you get somebody and they've got behavioral issues and they need some kind of major behavioral modification. We don't want to kill them. We just want to change their behavior. So what they did is they'd go in there and scramble around the front part of the brain and rendering the host creature, for all intents and purposes, useless. Because it seems to me that wiped away, when we say it wiped away their personality, doesn't seem to be a whole lot left after that, right? How do you carry on a conversation?
You can't.
And things like memory, are they able to maintain any kind of memory? Because memory is also in the front, isn't it?
Memory's in the front and in the temporal lobe, but you need the communication between the two in order to access it. So memory is triggered by, things emotional things. But if you scramble the frontal lobe, your emotions are also gone, and so their memory is almost non-existent, but they do have some memory. Yeah.
Probably as much as a chicken or a fish or something like that. I mean, just the bird brain, literally, because that's what happens to them. There are other things that, we've talked about, and you'll hear every once in a while when you're talking about a neurosurgeon, maybe you see something on television and you hear a key word and you go, okay, what's that all about? And just how deadly is something like an aneurysm?
So aneurysm is actually pretty a serious thing. Most patients with aneurysm that rupture don't make it to the hospital. They actually die at the time of the rupture. And so if you can make it to the hospital, you're, in a good position for the most part.
What exactly is an aneurysm?
So an aneurysm is an enlargement or a ballooning of the wall of a blood vessel. So you can have an aneurysm of the aorta, which is a big artery in the chest. But ideal of aneurysm is in the brain, which is a ballooning or enlargement of the artery wall in the brain. Typically, it's because the wall is weak, and so what happens is all the pressure from the blood pressure that is hitting the wall causes the aneurysm to balloon, and eventually enough pressure, the balloon will pop, and that's when you have a aneurysm brain rupture. So it's an emergency because you're losing blood into the brain, and it can lead to
and the organ will die.
Exactly, the brain will die. Exactly.
Is it painful? Is it instantaneous?
Yes, it's
in most
very
cases?
painful. You have a severe headache. It's called the worst headache of your life, literally. And when you get that severe headache, that's a sign that, hey, you have an aneurysm. You need to get to the hospital. Typically, if you have high blood pressure, if you smoke, if you have a history of aneurysms, if you have a history of aneurysms, if you're older, and if you're a male, your risk factor for having an aneurysm is a little bit higher.
And are there people that have these aneurysms that eventually survive them? I mean, I might survive the thing, and they put me in an ambulance, and they get me to you, and then what is it that you do?
So this patient actually came in with an aneurysm.
Yeah.
And so you can see here in the corner, that's a
little white spot in the CAT scan.
You can see the blood vessel here, and it leads to this aneurysm, which is a dilatation or a ballooning of the wall of the aneurysm. And so when I saw this, we considered having it treated by endovascular methods, basically going through the groin with a catheter to treat it.
All the way up to the brain, up to there.
Yes. But in his case, we couldn't do that. It wasn't an option. And so I came in and performed a craniotomy, which is an opening in the skull of the brain, found the aneurysm, and then put 2 clips on it to stop the aneurysm from growing. And so here's the CAT scan after the procedure. You can see here's one clip, here's another clip, and then here's where I made the opening in the skull. And then here's where I put the skull back together using plates and screws.
Well, did you fix the ballooning?
Yes, I fixed the ballooning.
Just by making, you put the clips in there, and that prevented, but didn't it prevent the blood flow, or are they?
Well, so what you do is you put the clip such that the clip goes at the neck of the aneurysm. That way you keep the blood intact, the blood vessel intact, but there's no more blood going into the ballooning part. and that's how you fix it.
It's 10 years ago, 15 years ago. How long have people been able to do this procedure? Because it sounds like, because otherwise it sounds like one of those things back. If you got this in the 50s, it was a death sentence.
In the 50s, yeah, you probably weren't going to make it.
Yeah.
In the 50s, what they were doing was literally tying off the vessel. So you had a stroke. You basically killed the blood flow. It was only in the late 70s that we started inventing clips to basically clip the aneurysm. But even then, the ability to do a craniotomy wasn't as sophisticated, and so patients would often die from
Literally
the
brain surgery. Yeah, it's certainly not as common than it is as it seems to be today. And again, these are things that we can do here on Guam. And then you mentioned stroke, and sometimes people will use aneurysm and stroke in the same breath.
Well, so a stroke can be a hemorrhagic stroke, which means you bleed into the brain, or it could be an ischemic stroke, which means that there's no blood flow going to the brain. So you have to qualify what you mean by a stroke. And so if you have an aneurysm that ruptures and it bleeds into the brain, that's typically, or by definition, a hemorrhagic stroke.
Okay. And then there's the other one.
Then there's the other one where there's a
lack of blood flow.
Exactly. So that's not an aneurysm. That's just a lack of blood flow. So that's called an ischemic stroke.
Okay. And so if you have an ischemic, what are the factors that lead to the ischemic strokes?
Typically, diet high in fat, obesity, high blood pressure, sedentary lifestyle, and family history.
Boy, you're describing a lot of people I know all of a sudden. It's Lent. This might be the cleanest eating that most people are going to get for the year.
You know, I always tell people to exercise if they can, stop smoking. All the fiestas and the red rice, they can cut down a little bit.
Moderation is
the
the key. Exercise is the key. Keep the numbers. If you go and you get a physical, the doctor will print out a whole bunch of numbers, and you can see that there are some numbers that will be green and some that will be red. The idea is to get the red ones so that they're all green, and that way you reduce obviously significantly the chances that there are going to be something that happens like that. Are there people that might be in some kind of advanced medical issue, an emergency issue, and they could go into a stroke situation like that, just being sick for a long time or having other diabetic issues that would lead to...
Yes. Diabetes is a well-known contributor to stroke and to other heart diseases. And so if you have diabetes, the checkup that we do as a physician is very different. We see you more often. We order more labs. And so we have to make sure that if you have high blood pressure, diabetes, kidney disease, that we're making sure that we're giving you enough different medications to treat it, because diabetes by itself is a risk for having other problems like stroke.
How will I know when I'm getting a stroke?
Typically, you'll see one side of your face. Well, you won't see it, but someone else will tell you. One side of your face droop down. You'll have some weakness on one side of the arm. You'll typically have difficulty with closing your eye all the way. When you smile, the smile will not be normal. One side will go up, one side goes down. And so those are all signs of a stroke.
That you're having somebody. So look for that if somebody all of a sudden in front of you doesn't look like things are all right. Now, my mother, I took her to the doctor once because her face was all droopy on one side. But we ruled out a stroke, and the doctors said she had Bell's palsy.
So that is another reason why you can have a droopy face, because the seventh cranial nerve is the nerve that allows you to smile, close your eye. Bell's palsy is a disease where that nerve is being irritated, and so it's not functioning. And so if you have Bell's palsy, only one side will go down. But typically what happens with Bell's palsy is it's a type of facial droop. Whereas for stroke, the facial droop is usually in the bottom part of the face. Okay. With Bell's palsy, it tends to be the forehead as well, and then also the bottom part of the face. Yeah. And so that's how you can tell the difference.
So you take a couple of pills, and eventually the disease will wear off?
With Bell's palsy, usually steroid is the treatment of option. Basically, you want to take the irritation away, the inflammation away, and so you give steroids, and that you get better.
But the important thing, friends, is to let the doctor make the diagnosis.
Of course.
Don't you make the diagnosis. Just Bell's palsy. Give it a rest. Let's go watch TV. Let's go and check out Netflix or something like that. Make sure that you go and find some kind of medical help for this. The problem that you will experience after that, though, in my opinion, is my mother didn't want to leave the house at all. Once she found out what it was, I mean, it's certainly a little bit of vanity involved here, but all of a sudden there was a side of her face that wasn't working right, and so there was a whole lot of errand running around that time to make sure that she could still get her needs met. Carotid artery endarterectomy.
Endarterectomy.
That's what he says. You say it that way, I'll say it my way.
So one of the causes of a stroke, as we talked about, is an ischemic stroke. You have 4 blood vessels that go from your heart to your brain.
Okay.
2 are in the back. They're called the vertebral arteries.
Oh, I didn't know that. I always thought there were just 2 in the front.
And there's 2 in the front called the carotid arteries. The carotid arteries branch off something called the common carotid artery. It gives off something called the internal carotid artery and the external. The internal continues into the brain to give blood flow to the entire brain. You can have a plaque or a blockage of the common and the internal carotid artery in the neck. If you have that, there is no medication that we can give to make that better, unless the stenosis or the blockage is not very severe. And so we have different numbers that we look at, and so we do different tests. Typically, if the stenosis is higher than 70% and the patients are having stroke symptoms, we want to intervene, typically with surgery, because we want to prevent further strokes.
But you don't want to be cutting around there, right?
You do, actually.
You do?
Well, typically first you want to use things like blood thinners to try and treat it. If that works, then great. If it doesn't work, then we can consider doing endovascular techniques like stenting. So we can go through the groin and then put a stent into the artery in the neck and open up the stenosis. Now, sometimes it's hard to get the catheter up there because the vessels don't follow a straight line.
Right.
If that's the case, then that's when a vascular surgeon or a neurosurgeon is called. Vascular surgeons and neurosurgeons are trained to do carotid endarterectomies.
But you've also got gear over at GRMC, so you can see where the road is, right?
That's correct. So typically I'll ask Dr. Shea, he's an endovascular guy, to help me by doing an angiogram to see if we can get to the stenosis or the blockage with the catheter. If we can, I think that's a better option because you avoid surgery. In certain situations, it's a better option to do the surgery, though. If we can't get there with the catheter with Dr. Shea, that's when, like I said, a vascular surgeon or a neurosurgeon would come into play. I am trained to do carotid endarterectomies, and so I do them. I did a few in my last job, and I've done plenty in my training. And so typically what you want to do is expose the artery by making an incision in the neck. The incision is a vertical incision that goes up and down. You want to find the artery, which is pretty easy.
Because it'll be throbbing.
It'll be throbbing, but there's landmarks you can use to find it. And as you keep doing it over and over again, you just know where it is. Once you find it, you want to literally stop the blood flow from going to the brain. But it's okay because you have two.
Because you got the other one is working.
Exactly. But you want to make sure that the other one has a way to go across. So you want to also get a CAT scan of the brain to look and make sure that there's cross communication between the 2 arteries. Because if there's not cross communication and you block off the flow,
then you're killing off one side of the brain.
Bad things will happen.
Right. Then you've caused a stroke.
Exactly. One thing I always do is I also do an EEG while I'm doing the procedure. Of
course.
An EEG will look at the brain waves. So if I see a drop in the brain waves, I know something is wrong. That tells me that I have to release the clamp or bypass the clamp by giving blood flow to the brain. So that's my way to check and make sure that nothing bad is happening.
You almost make it sound like you're plugging, like if you can imagine an old telephone switchboard, or you pull a switch, you pull the plug over here and plug it in over there.
Typically, that's what you do.
Really?
You're basically just you take one hose, you plug it into the where the tap is, and you plug the other end to the artery so that you can give blood flow to the brain. And
it makes it sound like it's the easiest thing in the whole wide world. Like I said, 20 years ago, it's a death sentence for somebody, that the kind of injuries that we're talking about. I don't know why it's in my head, but I'm curious, and maybe because March is Women's Month as well. Are there any significant differences between in the biology, if you will, of the male neurosurgeon, neuro pathways, and a woman's? Is it all that different between a man and a woman?
I've done
terms of the
surgery in both
physiology?
men and women. The anatomy is the same for the most part.
Okay,
The
okay.
physiology is a little bit different because men tend to get a little bit of worse risk factors as far as these diseases. Men have a higher risk of stroke. Men have a higher risk of bleeding in the brain. I can't explain why that is, and I don't think anyone can.
Because we're
to be honest with
boys.
you. But that
We
is
take liberties, and we think we're going to live forever, and that any decisions that I make will be forgiven as soon as the hangover wears off. That I think is what the problem is, And don't worry, I'll lead like this. What's the line is? You only live once, right? Everybody's you only live once, but you got to be careful because you actually the truth is you only die once, and so it's all of these things that can contribute to it. Exercise, moderation. We'll keep going back over that. It's nice that they have all of this great specialty care over at GRMC, but fact of the matter is, you can almost everything that we're talking about here outside of an accident is preventable. I mean, all of the things that we're talking about leading up to strokes and aneurysms are things that there are ways that we can prevent those from happening.
That is very true. I mean, if you eat healthy, exercise, don't smoke, which are very easy things to do. I'm not saying go run a marathon every day. Just, light jogging here and there, and it will lead to a longer, healthier lifestyle.
There's no such thing because it's hard here on Guam because it's really hot, and it doesn't matter which way you're going. There's wind against you.
At 6 in the morning, it's not too hot. I go jogging at 6 in the morning.
Yeah. I think I see.
Cool.
I think I see you out there from time to time taking care of that. It's a good exercise and a good example to everybody. I think we've already gone over what a craniotomy is, and that's the part where you take out this unbelievable shovel-sized section of my head in order to relieve the pain. But you'd also do a craniotomy now to get into it and actually do surgery in the brain, right?
Yes. If there's a tumor in the brain, I have to do craniotomy to get to the tumor. If there's like you said, aneurysm in the brain, I have to do craniotomy to get to the aneurysm. So the way to get into the brain is a craniotomy.
How deep into it? Because I look at it, I think it looks like a big old piece of cheese here. I mean, can you separate out the parts? I mean, are you allowed to cut into these parts of the brain?
With 4 years of medical school and 7 years of residency training, they teach you how to get to parts of the brain without damaging the brain.
Yeah.
There are natural cleavage planes in the brain, meaning that there are some parts of the brain where you can separate without going through actual brain. And so as you go through the training for residency, you learn how to separate these parts of the brain. And so that's how we get to the aneurysms. They are very deep. Sometimes they're in the middle of the brain. Imagine taking a line and drawing it from here, another line from here. Where those two lines meet,
that's where the problem,
where the aneurysm is. So you have to get in the middle of the head. And so you have to know how to get there safely. And that's where we're able to dissect. That's where dissection comes in. You want to basically carefully go through the natural planes to not cause any damage.
Does it become necessary sometimes to have to actually slice into the meat of the brain?
Well, in order to initially get into the brain, you do. But that's where you go through what we call non-eloquent areas, which are the parts of the brain that don't do anything. So even if you damage it, it's not a big deal. And there are
that
parts
we
of the
know
brain
of.
like that. That we know of. That is correct. That we know of.
you just never know.
Yeah, that's true.
Because I don't know. If it's up there, you figure there's a reason why it's up there, right?
Well, for now, we don't know what the reason is for that particular part. But the parts that we need to move our arms and think and speak, and that part we know where they are, and so we avoid those parts.
There's certain words and phrases that I know just like that. I mean, I'm driving around thinking about it and the words, and then I talk on the radio and it stops, and I don't know what the word is anymore. And or I'm really, really good at mathematics when it's right in front of me. But if somebody asked me to do mathematics while I'm running, while I'm doing this program, forget it. I can't do it in my head. Why is that?
The brain can multitask, but I'm sure you know when you multitask, your ability to focus is limited because you're sharing your resources amongst many things.
Story of my life.
So the same thing. If you're going to run, focus on running.
Yeah.
If you're going to run and do math, as you start to do higher math, it becomes almost impossible because the brain is trained to focus on one thing at a time.
Is there part of that though? I know that distance runners, triathletes, things like that, the brain will go into almost a survival mode, right? And so any of the allied things that we have to do, like mathematics, that are completely unnecessary at this time. I'm going to shunt that part of the brain. I don't need to send a whole lot of resources to that. Right now, I've got to worry about muscles. I've got to worry about respiration. I've got to worry about hydration. Some of the other functions of the body. So the brain is pretty good at marshaling out where the resources need to go in those times, right?
Think of the brain as a computer.
Yeah.
You have a limited amount of random access memory, or RAM. And so if your computer, you bought it with 4 gigabytes of RAM, you can't go on the internet and surf and watch Netflix and download YouTube videos, and you're limited.
Yeah.
And so as you increase your RAM to, let's say, 16 gigabytes, then you can start to do a lot more things. So the same thing happens in the brain. If you exercise it and constantly multitask and train it, then yes, you can expand the range of things you can do simultaneously. But you have to kind of constantly, do these things in order to get good at it.
That leads me into a theory, and we talk about the physiology of the brain, but there's the idea that it is a muscle.
It is a muscle. If you exercise it, it will get stronger.
Yeah. What a great takeaway for the listeners. So, I mean, if you're out there and you're going, well, I have been getting forgetful. Is that a function of age or plaque in the brain or things like that that are popping up? And the answer is, maybe you just need to exercise it a little bit more. Maybe some more Sudoku, maybe some crosswords.
Or even better idea, go take courses in college. Right now, I'm taking a course in GCC for automotive servicing, so I can exercise my brain, because now I know how to do neurosurgery.
Right.
But I want to learn more. I want to exercise my brain. And so I try to learn different things. I'm always learning.
And not to brag, but I have done that in my life. And so this year, I'm not doing it this year. This year, and I probably won't have time to think about it until after the marathon. My goal this year is to run a sub-4 marathon. Ooh. That's what I'm going to try to do. And I think I might be able to do it. But normally every year, I try to learn something new. And what do you say? You taking automotive?
Yes.
Okay, I did small engine repair.
Oh yeah.
I've done small engine repair. I've done HTML. There's the book, Basic Automotives. Yeah. See, there's a plug for GCC. We've got a brain surgeon that is taking a course in that kind of thing over at Guam Community College. A couple more questions, a little bit more time with the doc here as we talk about our health partners at Guam Regional Medical City, the first choice for all of your specialty care and, even brain surgery needs.
Attention homeowners, MRE solar energy systems now come with battery storage for zero money down. This means that your home will have power even when the island power isn't available, like during power outages or during and after storms. The inconvenience of not having power for your home is a thing of the past. It's solar with battery storage exclusively by Micronesia Renewable Energy. Don't be left in the dark. Call 632-2613 for a free consultation. MRE. The smarter choice.
Tired of your wireless prepaid service cutting you off when you reach your limit? Introducing Unlimited for Less with the new $2.50 a day prepaid plan from GTA. Enjoy unlimited local calls, local text, and unlimited data for only $2.50 a day. And now including unlimited calls and texts to the U.S. You can post, call, or text without worrying about reaching your daily limit. Come into any GTA store or visit gta.net for more information.
I got 9:54 in the morning, and in a few more minutes, as I said, with Doctor I want to make sure I get the name right every time, because it's not like it's Smith and Jones or anything like that. Dr. Kwasi Nyame, neurosurgeon at Guam Regional Medical City. He's already hit a couple of home runs over at that shop here, and we were talking a little bit during the break about the Facebook Live feed and how it's not working for you right now. But I guess the deal here is. I'm going to have to reboot this computer in just a little bit. And is there a way, because we were equating the brain and the computer a few minutes ago. So this computer with the Facebook Live is going to get rebooted. Can I reboot my own brain? Is there a way that I can just kind of, I don't know, Control Alt Delete?
There's no Control Delete button that I know of in the brain, in a human being. So your brain is your brain. You take care of it, and it's with you for life, unfortunately.
Does it ever go blank or restart? Are there conditions that people may have where they'll, I don't know, maybe black out or something like that? And
Even if you black out or have a loss of consciousness,
good.
typically you'll eventually come back to, and when you come back to, all your memories are still there. Now, if it's a serious brain injury, you may lose some memory, especially if you damage the temporal lobe, which is part of the brain that houses your memory.
Right.
But even if you go to sleep.
Yeah, he's going to ask you to put the headphones on. Mike wants to ask you a question, but even when you go to sleep, that's still not a full reboot.
That's correct, because you're still awake. You're dreaming. You're thinking. Sometimes you remember your dreams, and so it's not a reboot. And your brain is constantly working. It's constantly active.
Yeah, I've got those dreams where Anyway, I'm not going to say what those dreams are. Let me just say, I wish I could get back to those and just continue the rest of the story.
But going into what you were talking about here, so we've all heard, and I'm sure you've had patients ask you, about those moments where we daydream.
Yes.
And people are like, oh, well, that's just your brain kind of rebooting itself. Is there any truth to that, or that just doesn't work like that?
I'm not a specialist in sleep and dream and things like that, but as far as I know, there is no rebooting. I mean, when you daydream, you're basically taking a break from the reality of life for the most part, but you're not rebooting your brain. You're just kind of taking your brain elsewhere and letting it drift and wander. For the
I do that when I'm driving.
I do that a lot.
I totally mind drive, and before you know it, you're an agate, and you realize you just needed to pick up something over at Payless, and you just one of those crazy kinds of things that will happen, and sometimes it's brought on by injury, and sometimes it's just brought on because it's a pretty day, and that I suppose is all there is to it. What's your holy grail? What is it that I always ask guys, especially people with a DR or an MD, what is it that you're looking for, the thing that you want somebody to invent, or that you're going to invent with your automotive skills that you're going to learn? What is it that you want that change the field?
Change the field. I wish I would not have to operate. If I can not operate and treat a patient for their problem, I think that would be my holy grail, because even though I'm a great neurosurgeon and I'm board certified, I'm still a human being. Therefore, there's inherent risks and errors that I can make. My hands get tired. I get tired. And so whenever you do surgery, you accept a certain amount of risk. If I cannot do surgery and take care of the patient and take care of their problems, I think that is something that I would definitely fight for.
Is there a little bit of a trauma that you might feel? I mean, I'm sorry to get psychological with you, but I mean, you're opening up somebody's head, and at some point you are going to be manipulating parts of their actual brain. I mean, it's a squishy, wet, kind of gory part of the body. Is there every once in a while something that stays with you after that?
If there is, it's left me. No, I mean, I've had tough cases in my training, and I was left shaken, questioning whether or not, I should be doing this. Fortunately, the patients did well, and so I was vindicated, and I was able to come back the next day.
Best cases, yeah.
Exactly, and continue to work as a neurosurgeon, but even the best of us will have those days for the most part.
Are there ever any tricky traumas where you've opened up the skull and everything is just so mixed up and broken inside you're not sure where to start the fix?
You can't have those moments as a neurosurgeon.
You've got to know what's going on all the time
and collect it, and take your time. The best way to do it is to start with the most broken thing first, and then proceed from there. But that's not an option. If you're going to do this job, you have to be in your game.
Right. You're not alone in this job, though, and I think that was testimony, and certainly the case with the heart guys that you brought over the last time. And there's a whole team of people, and you've got people that back you up.
My scrub techs, awesome. Mr. Leon Guerrero, Brian Vergerger, even Dr. Weingarten. He's one of the neurosurgeons here.
Yeah,
I call him for help. Dr. Hale, my neurologist, Dr. Shea, even the CMO of GRMC, Dr. Cabrera, and now I work at GMH as well, and so I have colleagues there that I can call on to help me out. Even at GRC, I have people that I can call on, Dr. Malley from the neuroradiology. So yes, no, this is not an island. This is a community. And so I've actually gone out to the community and introduced myself to the community to say that I'm here to take care of your patients.
And if it doesn't work out, I can work on my car.
Anytime, let me know.
And I'll fix your lawnmower. The time is 10 o'clock in the morning. Your healthcare partner with Guam Regional Medical City today, Dr. Kwasi Nyame, neurosurgeon there. And a reminder, it is Brain Injury Awareness Month. So be aware. What's the deal? A little bit of diet, a little bit of exercise, and then maybe he won't have to do the surgery on you. We're KUSG Agania. This is 93.3 The Point. Time now for Fox News Live.
Dealing with severe flooding.
The American people are going to stand with people across Nebraska, across